I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Lincoln-Lancaster County Planning Commission of May 27th, 2020. The printed agenda is available outside the hearing room, and a copy of the full agenda, including the staff reports, is available at the front of the chambers with the clerk. The Open Meetings Act is posted just inside the doors at the back of the room. In order to meet the required social distancing protocols, we must limit the number of people inside the chambers. Staff is assisting individuals who are present and wish to testify on items on today's agenda by ensuring that each person has signed in. Staff will direct you into the chambers based on what items you are testifying on and your position on that item. Please note that only one additional person will be allowed in the chambers at a time. Once you have testified, you should exit the chambers using the doors to the right of the dais, and then the next individual will be directed in. It is recommended that once you testify, you leave the building. Based on estimations, we are staggering the times of various hearings over several hours. These times are identified in parentheses on the agenda. We are encouraging attendees to arrive no more than 15 minutes before their scheduled hearing. Sorry, excuse me. Please note that an agenda item will not begin before the time posted. In the event that the allocated hearing times go quicker than estimated, there will be breaks in the hearing. If you parked in the parking garage across the street to the north, the gate is open and no parking coupons are needed. Out of courtesy for those attending this meeting, commissioners and the staff, cellular phone usage is not permitted in these chambers during any portion of this meeting. We appreciate your cooperation. Please note that the Planning Commission action today is final on Agenda Item 1.1, Special Permit 20014. Any aggrieved person may appeal final action of the Planning Commission to the City Council or the County Board by filing a notice of appeal with the clerk within 14 days following the action of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission action on all other items is a recommendation to the City Council or County Board. The first item of business is to approve the minutes of the regular meeting held May 13th, 2020.
So moved. Campbell?
Second, Edgerton.
Jerry?
Okay. Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0.
The next item of business is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be called at the same time and will not be scheduled for a separate public hearing unless there is a request from someone wishing to speak or at the request of a commission member. I will ask Jerry to read all of the consent agenda items into the record. Once those items are read, she will ask if there is anyone wishing to speak. If you wish to speak on an item on the consent agenda, we would ask that you stand and state that item. That item will then be removed from the consent agenda and scheduled as a separate public hearing under Section 3 of today's agenda. All items remaining on the consent agenda will be voted upon in total with a motion for approval. Jerry, will you please call the items on the consent agenda?
Yes, prior to doing that, I would note that Commissioner Shear has declared a conflict of interest on agenda item 1.2, use permit 140G on today's consent agenda, and will recuse himself from this portion of the hearing. Item 1.1 is special permit 20014 to allow for oil excavation on property generally located at Northwest 40th Street and Highway 34. This is final action on this item unless appealed to the City Council within 14 days. And item 1.2 is use permit 140G to remove the TRIP land use table and to adjust the parameter setback at the northwest corner of the shopping center on property generally located at South 84th Street and Highway 2. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on these items?
I don't think so.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting either one of these sites?
I don't see any.
Okay. Is there anyone here wishing to speak on either one of these consent agenda items? If so, please inform a staff person at this time.
I don't see any. I would entertain a motion.
I would move approval.
Second, Joy?
Jerry?
Okay, this is for the approval of the consent agenda. Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Motion carried, 5-0.
I will now ask Jerry to call the requests for deferral.
Okay. We have received a written request from the applicant for a 2-week deferral of item 2.1, which is comprehensive plan conformance 2007, for the review as to conformance with the 2040 Lincoln Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan. It amends the Antelope Valley redevelopment plan to add the Gorilla Flats redevelopment project on property generally located at 2226 R Street. The 2-week deferral would be for public hearing and action on June 10th.
So move, Campbell.
Second, Edgerton.
Is there anyone present? Oh, go ahead and call the vote, Jerry.
Okay. Campbell,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Ryman Yost,
Yes.
Shear,
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0.
Is there anyone present wishing to testify on the agenda item at this time? Okay, I don't see any. So we will now proceed to public hearings. The staff will make a brief presentation. The applicant will then be requested to present his/her testimony, followed by those who wish to testify in support, followed by those who wish to testify in opposition. The staff will then be given an opportunity to respond to the testimony, and then the applicant shall have an opportunity for rebuttal. If, during your testimony, you have copies of documents or materials you would like distributed to the Planning Commission members and/or included as part of the record, please provide that information to the clerk for distribution. Each person testifying should state their name and address and shall have 5 minutes to speak unless additional time is requested and granted. The timer will go off after 4 minutes, then you will have 1 minute to wrap up your testimony. The Planning Commission will vote immediately at the close of the public hearing unless the commission votes to defer action or continue the public hearing. Jerry, will you please first call the first public hearing item?
Sure. Item 4.1 is change of zone 20014 from AG Agricultural District to AGR Agricultural Residential District on property generally located at 13350 North 84th Street. Staff recommendation is denial. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this item?
I don't see any.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting the site?
I don't think we have any of those either.
Okay.
All right, Steve.
Steve Hendrickson with the Planning Department. Gonna go over the details of the request. This is the only item we have today. We'll have to ask for your indulgence. My part will probably go a little bit over 5 minutes, so I certainly don't think mine of the standards go a few minutes over as well. Partly give you the details, but also can explain how something that appears to be such a small request, when carried out multiple times, could have larger implications. So this particular request is on the southeast corner of North 84th and Mill Road. The property today is 7.5 acres. The request is to change the zoning from AG to AGR. It is just outside of the city's 3-mile zoning jurisdiction, so it is in the jurisdiction of the county board. The property is currently zoned AG Agricultural. Here is an exhibit from the staff report that shows between Waverly Road, Mill Road, and Raymond Road. Most of this area is actually zoned AG Agricultural and is an agricultural use. There is an area 1/2 mile to the south on Waverly Road that is a pre-1979 acreage subdivision that was started with a small part that was then completed after 1979 to square off that quarter section. That's about 1/2 mile away. This area is designated in the comprehensive plan as agricultural. I have an exhibit actually that kind of shows everything east of Highway 77 in this area. So you're pretty much, you have just Waverly off to the southeast, Waverly Road. The only area that's really designated for low density residential in the comprehensive plan is that existing acreage subdivision. A lot of it is also just simply irregular lots that were platted all pre-1979. 1979 is when our lot size changed from 1 acre to 20 acres for the AG zoning. Otherwise, all the rest of this part of the county is designated as agricultural in the comprehensive plan. This particular property was split off as a 7.5 acre property as a farmstead off of a main property. We do allow farmstead splits where an existing farmhouse can be split off on its own property, often so it can be sold separate from the farm, often when there's a case of a transition in a family and there's no longer any interest in farming. The Standers, who are here today, purchased the property, and the previous farmhouse was demolished in 2017, and they built a single new house on the property. The purpose of their application is they would like to build a second house on the property for their kids so that they could live on probably a separate lot, but have a 3-acre lot. But since the minimum lot size here is 20 acres, as it is throughout the county, they can't do that without a change of zone to AGR. The Planning Department has recommended denial of this application. We actually think you have 3 basic courses of action. The one that we are recommending to you is that you deny it because it is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. And there's really not a unique circumstance here in terms of a reasoning why this property is somehow very different than a lot of other properties that are in the county. We also think it's rather inequitable and somewhat inconsistent to have a little spot of AGR zoning when all the rest of the area is in 20-acre minimum lot size. So why do we have the 20-acre minimum lot size? It's really to implement the goals of the comprehensive plan, which are trying to encourage this area, as well as a lot of majority of the county, to remain in agricultural use. There's also a lot of goals that talk about promoting local food and having local food grown within the area so that you're not completely reliant on food from outside of the area. And the goals of the comprehensive plan also encourage that acreages should cluster together rather than having them spread throughout the county. So that's why we have in our comprehensive plan areas specifically designated as low-density residential, so that you have those low-density residential areas kept together rather than spread throughout the county. It also would, you then focus those low-density residential areas on areas that have paved roads or have a rural water district or have good quantity of water. The north part of the county generally is not as many paved roads. In this case, both North 84th Street and Mill Road adjacent to it are both gravel roads. And this part of the county, in a very general sense, has had many issues with water quantity, something that's been mentioned before the Planning Commission and several recent special permits regarding campgrounds and a chicken farm. There was a lot of concern about amount of water. And certainly the impact on the road network, as you have more and more acreage development within an area, you get more demand for the road to actually be paved. And as you know from hearing past items on the county 1 and 6, the county is greatly struggling to try to keep up with bridge maintenance and bridge repair. We have a lot of bridges closed, as well as the demands for paving. So that is why we try to cluster the acreages within a certain area, and we've developed tools to try to do that, designated as in the comprehensive plan in such a way. We would also note that this is kind of an application that we get calls about every month. I mean, we get literally every month dozens of calls from people who have a 20-acre farm property or larger and want to split it off for a family member, or have smaller lots and would like to further subdivide them. And often it's because it's a family member. They have a family member they'd like to gift a lot to, or they're older residents and they're thinking down the road and would like to have a family member live close by. And so this is not a unique request from that standpoint. You also see in the city as well, we've talked about accessory dwelling units and things to try to give people options, but yet fit within the bigger picture of the reasoning why we have a 20-acre minimum lot size, which is really to try to promote conservation of our farmland. Now, we acknowledge that this is just one lot, and it's only going to add one house. And so one house alone is not going to probably impact the water and is not going to impact the roads. But the challenge is that if you approve this AGR, which is really your second option, you really set a precedent. And so that is what really we see as one of the issues, is that it's not really equitable to say, well, we're just approving it for this person. They came in and asked, but anybody else who comes in and asks to subdivide a 6 or 7 or a 10-acre lot and to get AGR zoning so they can subdivide, we're not going to do it for them. We're not going to have a precedent. And what we're trying to say is that in our review of this application, we didn't see anything that was unique. We certainly understand their reasonings for it. It's a great reason to have your your family members live close, but it is not necessarily a unique set of circumstances that you wouldn't find here. And so if the county started approving little spots of AGR all over, we don't think that would be equitable. As we noted, a lot of times in the planning world, there's a lot of discussion about spot zoning, where you single out a individual property for special treatment that mostly just benefits that individual property owner and not the area around it, and isn't in accordance with the comprehensive plan. And so we see that kind of a fact pattern here, is if we approved just this little spot, but then decided we weren't going to do it anywhere else. Because we did take a look and found that in the county jurisdiction alone, not including the city and all the small incorporated places, there are over 1,500 lots today that are zoned AG, that are less than 10 acres, and are not even in a CUP or anything. These are just lots that were created over time through farmstead splits or pre-1979 when the minimum lot size was smaller. So we see that cumulatively, again, if you tried to do this, and, anytime someone came in and tried to do it, it would have a significant impact. So the third way you could do this is you could say, well, we're going to go ahead and approve this, but it won't be a spot because we really sympathize with this, and we really think that we should start allowing all of the smaller lots to subdivide. And we'd first caution that really shouldn't be done in an ad hoc manner. We're currently looking to update our comprehensive plan. So while we think that would be a very significant impact to suddenly change our policy here to say, yes, we're actually going to encourage all of the smaller 10-acre lots to subdivide further, that should really be taken a look at as a whole and not suddenly to change course in the middle. Because certainly our county engineer, when you started to look at the cumulative impact of those 1,500 lots, many of them being able to further subdivide into two, that cumulatively, again, there'd be a big impact if we decided to shift our policy, not just do it for one, but now suddenly allow it for everyone else. And so that's really should be something that would be looked at in the comprehensive plan, though again, we understand this is not a popular thing to tell people sometimes. They look at a small 7-acre lot and it's not in farm use, there's no farm use being done to it. Why can't they subdivide? But we have to explain it's a part of the bigger picture. You've already been subdivided off from a larger property in many cases. You're already the smaller lot that's been allowed to be created from the larger lot. So certainly we recommend denial. You do have the option of recommending approval to the county board. But we'd also note, in addition to your three choices, that the standards, if their application is denied, still have some other options as well. I mean, their letter that they have a letter with their application, but also one that they followed up with before time, talked about they wanted to have family members live nearby, and that's a great thing. So there are other ways they could achieve that. I mean, certainly they could do the things where they could apply for an accessory dwelling unit. However, in talking with them about it, their family members have a large family and wouldn't fit in a 600 or 800 square foot house, so we understand that. And the standards themselves don't want to have the smaller dwelling unit and have the bigger house. So it didn't really fit for their family circumstances. Their children could purchase a house that's nearby if one was for sale, not necessarily on their property. They could also look at other vacant lots that were in the area, because from time to time, particularly not time to time, there's houses for sale, but there are other lots, even within a half mile to the west, for example. We pointed out, here's 12 lots that were platted. None of them have been sold. They were platted prior to 1979, so they're legal lots. Also, there's things like the adjacent property to the east is 280 acres of farmland. That farm property could, rather than starting to divide off into 4 20-acre lots, which are legal to have a 20-acre lot, and on any 80, you could have 4 houses on 20. We have the AG preservation tool, which allows you to cluster those 4 units into one corner and keep the rest in farmland. So the adjacent property, they could work with them to create one lot next to theirs. It wouldn't be on their property, but that would be another way. They'd have to purchase that right and work with that property owner next door. So certainly those are not as easy as simply changing the AGR zoning. But unfortunately, we had to recommend denial on this one because when we were looking at the bigger picture of it. So with that, I'd certainly be able to answer any questions if you have them.
I have a question. It's not related directly to the application topic, but it is related to something you brought up, which is the ADU route. And when we passed the resolution for ADU after there was a study about that topic in the county a couple of years ago, I think it was maybe a couple of years ago. As I recall, we had a discussion, and there are a number of conditions, and we were very sort of intentional about saying those conditions could be amended,
True.
except for two of them, as I recall. I went back and looked this morning. I think it still stands as two. So when you talked about the size of the dwelling unit, that was one of the conditions that we talked about could be amended in certain cases. So I don't exactly know where that discussion comes in. I just wanted to get it into the record that maybe there is some ability, if the planning commission, or not the planning commission, but the planning staff, and then the commission, would be willing to think about amending some of those conditions to maybe make this work with the family being on site with another unit.
Sure.
So you want to talk about that a
yes,
little bit?
Yes, I can. So one of them is the limit is 1,000 square feet.
Right.
And no more than 2 bedrooms. So, and really the idea was not to create a system to have a second dwelling unit built on the site, but accessory, smaller. It would be tied to the same utilities. It would be close to the same the main house. It wouldn't be allowed to be subdivided off and split separately. And really the idea is mostly they're 600 to 800 square feet. Through the discussion was, well, in a rural area, perhaps because there's less concern about 1,000 square feet, maybe 1,000 square feet. So we really think that it's important in order to keep that accessory standard that you really try to keep below the 1,000 square feet. And actually in 2 weeks, you will have an application that will raise that very same point for an existing house they'd like to use as an accessory, and it's 1,600 square
Right.
feet. It's far beyond it. So in this case, if they're looking at a house that would have more than 3 or 4 bedrooms for a family member and be 1,600 square feet, and particularly you might find that given that it's going to be under separate ownership, that they would want to have that subdivided off so that it could be independently have its own mortgage. That really doesn't work with
Yeah,
the
and
accessory
I'm not
dwelling
talking
unit.
about
No, no.
subdividing or separate lot or anything. I'm just
Right.
talking about the site. As I recall, we talked about the fact, it sounds like we might be getting an application like this, where that one condition about size, for example,
Yes.
could be amended in
Correct.
a special case. Now, that goes through a whole nother review process. I understand
Right.
that. But I'm just bringing it up to see if the planning staff would be willing, if the applicant wanted to go through that process, would be willing to work through that and see what
Yeah,
could be done.
unfortunately, we think like from what their interest is here that wouldn't work.
Okay. I just wanted to flesh that out.
No, I appreciate it because
Yeah.
that was one of the options that we listed.
Yeah.
Dick?
Steve, a few months ago, I can't remember exactly when, we had the proposal before us on wanting to build a second house on the lot, split the lot. How is this different than that one? It was a father and it was going to be a son, I believe, that was going to build.
Yeah, the caregiver
Yeah.
on site.
Was the-
Without, you mean in terms of the second person was allowed as an employee? Because we also have a special permit that allows you to have what's called domestic employees.
I think it was a family member.
It was still a family member. We didn't really talk about if they got paid or not. Oh, what was that?
I'm afraid that it's
Can't
not
remember.
immediately ringing a bell.
But we approved that one. And
A change of zone to AGR so that somebody could split off
I
their...
can't remember what the change was, but I do know they were on a paved road where this isn't. And that's the only difference I could remember.
I thought it was an ADU.
I thought it was
And I
an
thought it
ADU
involved
also.
an accessory dwelling unit.
Was it?
I did, yes. I don't think it was 2 separate lots. I think it was 1 lot.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because we have had a few accessory dwelling unit. I haven't had a lot of them, But those, yes, those are always on the same lot, smaller. We haven't had one that was going to be significantly larger than 1,000 square feet. So maybe those are some of the circumstances. I'm sorry that it's not immediately popping to mind.
And to your knowledge, do you know if any of the lots are still available for building in the AGR that's south of them?
In looking at the AGR to the south, no, I didn't immediately see that any of those was vacant. There is one that is vacant that is owned by the adjacent property owner. It looks like they're using it as part of their property. So other than that one, it's really more of a mile or so to the west, off in this area, that there is a platted area with 12 lots, all owned by the same person, that look like they were platted way before 1979. They're continued to be farmed today, but they appear to be legal lots where you could go ahead and build a house in one of those.
Any other questions for Steve right now?
The only other question I had goes off of the person being an employee or a caregiver. Is there something still associated with that farm help, having a dwelling on site if they're a farm help or that type of thing? Is it, or did that go by the wayside?
Yeah, in theory, you could have a 40 or an 80 acre property and have a dwelling, two dwellings on the same lot, but you'd still have to meet the 1 per 20. So
Okay.
you'd still have to have 40 acres to have the two houses. You could have the two houses on the one lot. I have to say, we just don't see anybody doing that new anymore. The mortgage requirements are almost always where they want to have two separate properties in terms of houses and mortgages.
Right, I agree, yeah. And you did answer the question, let me just make sure I understood you correctly, that you can potentially use an adjacent owner's property to consolidate houses and then buy the rights to do that?
Yeah, so for instance, at 84th and Mill Road, the adjacent property here, there's actually a very large 280 acres that is all under one ownership. So through the AG preservation, you don't need to have a plat or that type of thing. A preliminary plat, excuse me, you need to have a final plat. You can come in and say, okay, I'm going to plat 4 lots. You can also do them one at a time of 3 acres. And ultimately, rather than doing 4 20-acre lots, I do 4 3-acre lots. The rest of it then is an outlot, perpetually for preservation for farming. And then you have the 4 lots, they have a shared driveway, and they can all be then used independently as 3-acre lots. The density doesn't increase, so the amount of water and traffic impact doesn't increase, but then you could sell one of those 3-acre lots that could be then used for a house to be built on.
Yeah, and I think the one that we were talking about, Dick, before was an accessory building that we allowed to occupy.
Okay.
Yeah, we
With
did.
Rachel was
Yes,
the-
we did have somebody come in under extended home occupation and had a large accessory building. We've had them used for storage and those type of things as well. And there's a different special permit for that.
Any other questions right now? Okay.
Okay. I'd also just note, I had forgot to mention that you did receive this morning one letter that was in opposition. It was from a Wayne Nielsen at 14000 North 70th Street, which would be approximately, the address would be about a mile to the west, that pointed out his concerns in regards to preservation of ag land, impact on roads and services, and also noted that he's worried about spraying, and he actually on his site spreads biosolids from the city's sewer treatment plant, and occasionally within a half mile has people who complain about the odors as a part of his field application. And so he had expressed his concern about the application.
Janet Stander. I live at 13350 North 84th Street. And some of what I'm going to read, Steve already talked about. So, but I'm going to read it anywhere because I don't want to get lost in what I'm doing here. So, After we submitted our request to subdivide, Steve Hendrickson called to explain the process and informed us of the probability that our request would be denied. He very kindly gave us the option to drop our request and have the check for the fee returned to us. Ray and I decided, in spite of the slim odds in our favor, to continue with the subdivision request because this is so very important to us and to other elderly rural residents that hope to have family live nearby so they can stay in their homes for as long as possible. Ray and I talked about the many reasons that small acreage requests are denied and decided that even though our request would be denied, it is important to present another point of view to you. We understand that a rural, small acreage subdivision request is very rarely approved because if it is approved for one, it would be difficult to deny the request of others. Also, that over time, the growing number of additional individual rural housing would put a strain on water resources and increase the demand for paved roads and other improvements. However, when I mentioned the new rural housing developments we have seen, Steve explained that if a farmer wanted to develop 80 or more acres of farmland, that request could be approved. So large rural housing, developments of multiple water users could be approved, yet individual requests would not be approved because a single house would be an additional burden on the water supply, emergency services, and road and bridge maintenance. We think that we must be missing something because that doesn't sound right to us. Many individual subdivision requests could be approved if not for the approval of large housing developments. We do not believe that individual requests should not be approved because they would increase the demand for paved roads. We believe that large rural housing developments would be far more demanding to have paved roads than an individual rural homeowner. Do we prefer paved roads over rock or gravel? Yes. But if the paved road increased traffic, which they do, we would prefer to not have paved roads. County roads will need to be maintained whether there is only one house or two on an acreage. And we will take this opportunity to compliment our county road crews. From what we have seen, they do a great job. Ours is not a new acreage. It's an old farmstead that we cleaned up. We had to take down the old house built in 1880 as it was not habitable for humans. When we took it down, 13 raccoons and 2 vultures had to find a new home, and also a skunk that was underneath of it. So this was never cropland that needs to be preserved. If our 7.59 acres is subdivided, each lot would be larger than 3 acres, which we're hearing that 3-acre lots are okay. We have lived on farms most of our lives and have a good understanding of and respect for farmers and what they do. Most of the rural residents we know have this same good understanding and respect. We grew up in a farm. We lived where we have now for a year and a half, almost 2 years, and we know that they're going to spray, and we're going to try to get bees and all that kind of thing, and we know that could be a problem. But we've been in this situation most of our lives, so we understand that. So we don't have a problem with what the farmers are doing. It's not an issue for us. We do not agree that our request is only for our benefit. Our acreage has been called remote by many. Our son and his family have always been involved in their community. They are very good to all those in their neighborhood. And considering that many of our neighbors sometimes need help, our son and his family, being younger, living near us, benefits all those who live near us. We believe that everyone is supposed to help each other whenever possible. We believe that that is what life is all about. As previously stated, Ray and I have been rural residents most of our lives. We have known so many elderly rural residents that would have loved to have family live close to help them be able to stay in their homes for as long as possible. Sadly, most never have that option. Considering all the information you have provided to us, we hope that in the future you will consider the very great needs of your elderly rural residents to be just as important as the demand for new rural living developments. It's very hard to not conclude that individual rural residents are at quite a disadvantage when compared to the many people who want to experience a community rural life. We hope that you will consider reevaluating your rules for fairness for future rural individual subdivision requests. And one thing too, for years, Ray and I, we've driven back and forth on the highways and county roads. Constantly you see abandoned farmsteads where the older people, they can't stay there anymore unless they had someone around them. And we believe very firmly that your rural areas need to be healthy with young people coming in, and if you don't do this, all those old houses, we just saw another one this morning coming into town. And the house that we saw, that acreage had been abandoned for over 10 years. And from what we had heard, that family could still be there if someone had been there to help them. So this is, something that I feel very strongly, as does Ray, that the rural community, this is a life. Do we really want to lose all of this? I mean, there's farmsteads that they're just disappearing all over. And that is one thing too, when Steve mentions all the acreages and farmsteads that are out there now, they're not going to be very many. I mean, we have old people living near us right now that they're quite in pretty bad health. They're not going to be there forever. And when they leave, some of those houses and stuff, you think, if nobody is there to take care of that home and those buildings, they're going to disappear. And for us, we really value that rural life for people. We are very thrilled that we were able to find an acreage we looked for months. We had a realtor looking for a place, an acreage that were from Grand Island, and he looked for months. We'd run down here and try to see the property. Oh, it was already gone. Luckily, the place we found, we thought this, God intended for us to be there, because we got, the realtor called us and he said, there's this property, and we were going to come the next day, and he called us, said somebody else got it. So we were too late. A couple days later, he said they backed out, because the amount of work to clean up that farmstead, we were overwhelmed, and we are used to working hard. And we looked at the place and we thought, okay, we can do this. Everybody told us we were crazy, but we did it. It took us 2.5 years to clean that place up. But we are older, and it's not getting easier. Things are getting tougher. And, with our current health issues, we're pretty tough. And our entire life, it's like you push yourself, push yourself, push yourself. When we got hurt, we pushed ourselves because we knew overall we were going to be healthier if we just didn't lay down and rest. And that's the way most rural people are. And I hate to see that type of lifestyle disappearing. It makes us sad. And I really hope, considering all the old people I have known in my life, and we've helped a lot of old people, and I was very blessed to be able to live right next door to my parents for a while, and it was so much better. I could go over there every day and make sure they took their medication, that they were eating properly. I could walk in and see that my mother's legs were swollen, and I could take her to the doctor. And when she had a stroke, I had an appointment, and I thought I have to check on her first, and I found she had had a stroke. And so, I never even thought about my appointment. I took her to the emergency room. And this is the kind of thing that families really need. And if you want to preserve the rural lifestyle, you have to change how you see these farmsteads and the people who are out there on acreages. Because if nobody's going to take care of those places, they just rot, like the place that we have. It was just a big mess. It's dead animal carcasses all over. And so, I really, even if we are denied, I really hope that you will think about the plight of these older people, because they really pretty much figure, this is the way it is. I'm either going to die in this house or I'm going to go to a nursing home. And I don't think most of us really want to go to a nursing home if we don't have to. So I guess that's all I have to say. And thank you very much.
Any questions? Dick?
This is purely a future question. If the two of you were to pass, what would happen to your house?
We thought about that before, and we thought, well, it would be nice if our son could move into our house, because we built this house to accommodate a wheelchair, which my doctor said that is what we needed to do. So for the older person, the older family, it'd be better for him to live there. And they do have younger family members that, yes, and we thought about that. Well, what would happen? well, hopefully, it would happen that the younger family members, there's going to be grandkids and everything by the time they're our age. We have lots of grandkids, and those kids are to the age where if they had a job in Lincoln, which, it's probably more likely they could get a job in Lincoln than a lot of other places in Nebraska, but we thought then this could continue. And, I can't see that far ahead. I don't plan on passing away for a long, long time, especially my husband. His mother lived to be 96, and I think he's probably more likely to live longer than me, but we never know. You never know what God's gonna have you do, so.
Thank you.
Other questions?
And when we were talking earlier about the accessory dwelling unit, from a size or management standpoint, is that something that you could explore if you had some waivers to the size and bedroom?
First of all, it wouldn't be big enough for our son and his family, and they have pets and, but second of all, it would be at our expense. It would be our expense for our property, and we can't afford that.
Right, because you couldn't subdivide and do
And
the
then
things
two,
they require.
if at some point, I'm sorry, were you?
No, go ahead. So,
If at some point we needed to sell that property, it'd be much more difficult to have that additional house that had to be sold with it. It might, price out a lot of people from purchasing it. But, yeah, we did consider that.
good, great, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any testimony in support of this application? Any testimony in opposition? Okay, staff. Questions for staff?
Steve Hendrickson, Planning Department. I did find Dick's application. So fortunately, Tom Chaka was in the building and listening in, so I can help explain that because you have a better memory than I do. So this was when you had July of last year. This was a special permit for an accessory dwelling unit. It was up on Northwest 27th Street. It was an existing 20-acre property that had a house and a garage on it. And the two waivers that came in with it was the house itself was only 870 square feet. They were adding on to an existing garage. But one part of the rules is also that the accessory house can't be more than 40% of the size of the main one. And in this case, it was going to be 46% because the main house itself was only 1,900 square feet. And then the second waiver was that the septic field was over here and was too small for it. And the health department agreed it was made much more sense to put a septic field over here rather than cross a bunch of utility lines and try to get it over to the other one. So those were the two waivers that had it actually stayed within the 1,000 square feet. So
Thank you.
I'm glad you recalled that.
Other questions for Steve right now? No? Okay. Do you have anything else you want to add? Come on up if you do.
The property right to the south of us had come up for sale. The owner passed away. And we put a bid on it, and someone outbid us. So, we've been aware, that we probably would be denied this, so we've been looking. And, we can't get what you can't get, so, thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I have one more question. Have you looked at the acreages that are to the west of you and south of you?
No. As far as us being adjoined, or, like our son and us be there, we just built this house, and I'll tell you, it was quite an ordeal. It takes forever. And we had decided, this is it, we're not moving again. The next place we go is to a nursing home or to the grave. That's it. It's
Well,
just-
no,
it's too much.
what I'm questioning is if there are any of those acreage, or those lots that are bare or available for sale that would fit the needs. The area west that has no buildings on it at the present time, As Steve said, there's 12 platted lots there.
When were those platted, do you know?
Steve, would you say something before 79?
Yes.
See, and he had mentioned that, and we thought, okay, that farmer, if they haven't tried to sell those lots by now, they're not planning on it. So if there was something available that our son could get, I don't think it's likely.
Wouldn't hurt to ask.
Okay, but where do we get the information?
Come on up.
To the west.
If you go to the south in the Finnegan subdivision, there's been,
The south subdivision is AGR, but there's also the platted lots to the west.
there's been several of those south of us within the half mile have come up for sale and sold.
Okay,
To the north on Raymond Road, there's 5 or 6 5-acre plots that have houses on them that are not AGR listed. And there's a 20-acre area there within a mile. We were just hoping to be lazy and have it next door
Right
instead of
there.
going a mile and a half.
right.
We were looking the most efficient use of space, the land itself. I think of it as like an amoeba. The hill there is very steep. It's not farmable. I've farmed at the point where you bring the equipment in, you can't turn on a dime. You got a 16 to 24-row planter, you can't turn around. You take an acre to turn around and plot and then be able to save it. Otherwise, you just cover it in for different directions. We were just hoping that it would be more efficient use of the land,
Thank you.
and your oak trees grow well.
I would entertain a motion.
I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second, Joy.
Jerry?
Okay, Campbell,
Yes?
Edgerton,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Raymond Yost,
Yes.
Shear,
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-0.
I would entertain a motion.
I'll move to, how do I say this? Approve the denial, since the staff report is to deny. I support that, is what I'm trying to say, Jerry.
Okay.
So, I'll make that motion.
Is that?
Recommendation of denial.
Recommendation of denial.
Got it.
Second?
Discussion.
I would like to start discussion. I feel very strongly about all of the arguments that Steve made in defense of the recommendation or the motion to deny, the arguments regarding precedent and what our comp plan has and continues to attempt to do for the county. Those are all arguments, and I think it's information that makes this very difficult to not recommend denial. So I want to start with that. However, I agree with everything that your testimony, that you made in terms of your testimony regarding the big picture about the decline and the continued decline of rural properties like this. My family is dealing with this in northern Nebraska right now, and these places literally melt. That's how I describe it, and it's sad to see. And I do think that if there were ways to allow them to continue with additional help from younger family members, other ways, I think that'd be a great thing. I don't think our rules allow that at all with the change of zone approach. The only way that I see the possibility of doing this is through the ADU process with waivers. I don't know if you could get there with that route or not. It sounds like maybe it doesn't work for you at the end because of the inconvenience or the inability for you to be able to sell that property at some point. I totally get that. So maybe it doesn't work, but that's the only way I can see with what our county's trying to do from a long-range planning perspective to accomplish what you're trying to do. So that's why I'm going to support the motion, but I totally understand what you're trying to do, and I applaud you for the efforts you're trying to make out there.
The reason I seconded is based on what Dennis just said about our comprehensive plan and also the can of worms it could open for many other programs. I sympathize with the standards, and I do think, Steve, that as a planning department, we need to take a look at what might be a way to allow something like this to happen in the future, because it's not creating a whole new property that's taking away from farmland. It already exists as it is, and I'm sure there's many others like the standards that would like to have family living close to them. So I think we need to look at what options we might be able to pursue if it wasn't expanding into taking other land.
I agree with my fellow commissioners that it does seem like it's a slippery slope with regard to the way our codes, our comprehensive plan is set up at this time. But we are in the middle of reviewing that at this very moment. We're in the throes of that conversation, and perhaps the timing is well placed for that conversation to continue as to whether this policy continues to support what we're trying to do in our community. And if it does, great, but if there are ways to accomplish some other things within the boundaries of that, then we have the process in front of us to take a look at that.
And I do applaud you for going forward, even though the odds were stacked against you, because we do have our rules in place at this time, and it's a perfect time, like my fellow commissioners have said, to bring this forward so we can explore it with our Plan Forward 2050. There's all kinds of crazy things out there that people have thought about that don't work with our system, such as housing co-ops, like if you had a bigger house and you could share the mortgage, but that works in Canada, but not in the United States. So there's lots of things that maybe with the changes we're making in society today, it might be worth pursuing as a whole. But unfortunately, I will have to be supporting the motion.
I just wanted to say too, the idea of creating opportunities for people to age in place and be able to remain at home is a significant issue that we're going to have to face as a community moving forward. We know what our demographics look like. And so I really do applaud what you are wanting to do, and having grown up in a small town myself, I understand the importance of family connections. I had 3 family members all on the same block in the town near my ranch when I grew up, so I do understand that. And I am hopeful that this is something we can look at in the comprehensive plan moving forward to avoid some sort of domino falling precedent setting situation right now. And hopefully the time is in place to be able to look at other options. So I appreciate you bringing this forward, even though you knew that the odds were probably not great at this moment in time, but hopefully there will be possibility moving forward.
I echo all of our, my fellow planning commissioners' sentiments. I understand where you're coming from. I think most of us are probably facing those situations right now. I know we have some in our family, but I have to support the comprehensive plan, but the good news is we are working on that right now, so this is very timely for us and things to think about as we work on that. So, Jerry, I think we're ready.
Okay, this is for the denial of change of zone 20014. Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
The portion of the hearing reserved for anyone wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda has been suspended until further notice. I would call for a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Jerry?
That's Shear?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Raymond Yost,
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Motion carried. Oh, I skipped share, I'm sorry. I don't think I called for a
I don't
share.
remember if I said yes, yea or not. Yeah,
Okay,
yes.
6-0. Sorry.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.